Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Many of you are familiar with Elders Climate Action, but for those of you who aren't, we are the elders, including grandparents, great aunts, and great uncles, and folks who care about the future for all children. As ECA members, we're determined to do all we can to leave a livable planet for future generations. Our programs, communications, and chapters seek to inform, inspire, and engage others across generations to take action on the climate crisis at the local, state, and national levels. ECA is elder-centered and volunteer-driven, and you can learn more about us or get more involved at eldersclimateaction.org. Now, this evening, we're having an hour-long presentation, and we have two amazing speakers. First, we're going to speak with youth climate activist and organizer of the Youth Hub for the New York City Mobilization, Helen Mancini, and then we'll be joined at 7:30 by Bill McKibben. We were lucky enough to have Bill join us for the March at the Elders Hub and have him come in again tonight. For tonight's call, we won't have a formal Q&A session, so please enter your questions in the Q&A box as they arise. We'll try to work as many questions as possible into the conversation. And many of us were lucky enough to be in New York City for the March, but not an option for everyone, since we didn't want people flying all over the world and using all those fossil fuels to all go to New York. But still, we had over 70,000 people in New York. I was lucky enough to be there. I went on a bus from my home in Maryland, organized by the local 350.org chapter. And it was amazing. Pretty much the whole spectrum of the climate movement, everything from Citizens Climate Lobby marchers promoting bipartisan solutions to people promoting revolution as the next possible step, and everything in between. But really the focus was we need to end fossil fuels, and we need to work with the Biden administration to push the Biden administration to declare climate emergency and to do everything that's needed to move us away from fossil fuels as rapidly as possible. Now, many others of you may have been there at the march. If you have a specific highlight or takeaway you'd like to share, we'd love to see those in the chat box. We're going to start with a 2.5 minute video. The first half of the video was created by People versus Fossil Fuels. In the second half, you'll see a few videos and photos from Elders Climate Action members who participated in the march.
Declare a climate emergency.
We're here today to tell our leaders loud and clear, you need to phase out fossil fuels to survive our planet.
The cynics want us to believe that organizing doesn't matter, that our political system doesn't matter, that our economy doesn't matter, and we're here to say that we organize out of hope.
And fossil fuel. Our lives depend on it today.
Stop the expansion and phase out.
From President Biden to the UN General Assembly to all of our elected officials, we demand a change. It will happen now. It begins today.
So I ask you, what are we going to do about it? What do we want right now? Climate action?
No!
Climate action?
No!
Climate action?
No!
And today, there are tens of thousands of us out here with one simple message for Biden. You have the executive authority to end oil and gas expansion and keep these fossil fuels in the ground.
with that video, you saw our two amazing speakers, Helen Mancini and Bill McKibben. So let's get started with Helen.
Hi everyone, I'm Helen. I was the person in the middle of that video. I made a speech at the March to End Fossil Fuels, and I was also an organizer for the March to End Fossil Fuels. I'm 16 years old. I'm a junior at Stuyvesant High School in New York City, and the organization that I work with is Fridays for Future in New York City. Like a lot of young people, I got involved because of Greta Thunberg and her example, striking every Friday, and I felt called to act that same way. At the march, the first thing I said was that this was a continuation of the school strike I did in 2019, and how I was wanting to be here in New York City, wanting to organize the next big mobilization because I felt so empowered in 2019, and I felt like I could see real change in 2019 when hundreds of thousands of young people filled the streets for 2 Fridays. This whole process has lasted around 5 or 4 months. We started back in April planning for this march, and I'm just here today to share a little bit about how that was for me, and then also answer some questions at the end. So I guess I'll just get started. So back when we first decided this messaging in April, our main priority was writing into climate policy fossil fuels. The Paris Agreement doesn't say anywhere anything about fossil fuels, which is crazy because fossil fuels are what's causing the climate crisis. And a lot of that's because the most powerful actors in these climate negotiations are fossil fuel companies. And we can make these lofty goals, but without actually recognizing the perpetrator, which is fossil fuels, we can't achieve them. And this march was about achieving them, achieving these goals by specifically ending fossil fuels. For youth, this has been really important. Projects like the Willow Project have gone viral on social media because people are so confused as to why a president, a Democratic president, is approving projects that are carbon bombs that are going to be ensuring our reliance on fossil fuels for the next 10 years. And as a young person myself, I felt called to speak on behalf of my generation, to organize on behalf of my generation who I knew felt confused and conflicted and hurt by these approvals that we were seeing from our representatives. It was also timed around this summit. This Climate Ambition Summit that happened on the 20th of September was unlike any of its kind, and what they did, first time in history, the US couldn't speak at a UN summit that they might have wanted to speak at because they weren't a mover and doer on climate action. This means that every head of state or even head of a smaller state like Gavin Newsom was allowed to speak and talk about how they were doing stuff on climate change and how they were ending fossil fuels, but people who weren't allowed to speak. And this gave a platform to a bunch of smaller countries, or not even smaller countries that are just doing a lot and making sacrifices to address the climate crisis on the international stage. And this has been really powerful in leading us into COP28 because we're centering the voices of people who are making progress right now. And the United States federal government needs to get on that level. So that's why we organized this march, to let Biden know, as the person with the most executive authority to do stuff about climate change right now, that this is what we want. This is what his constituents want from him. So this entire organizing process was centered completely in intergenerational and intersectional organizing. For me, that was something I hadn't done before. All of the strikes I've ever organized have been school strikes. I've only focused on turning out high schoolers. And that's been really powerful for me because I am a high schooler. I can organize my own community. But like with Elders Climate Action, organizing your own community in conjunction with a bunch of other communities also organizing themselves is actually where the most power comes from. And that's why I've loved being a part of this march, because I was able to work on a core organizing team of people of all ages and all different backgrounds, and then go back to my own community and organize that and be able to share in similar experiences and what's bringing us together towards this march. So how we did it was through a hub captain structure. It's similar to People's Climate March and to the 2019 Climate March. We build upon these marches every time they happen, and we learn from them every time. And New York City is an amazing place to be in because we have so much history and tradition with activism to learn from. But what my job was to organize high school hubs. I was working with a really awesome colleague who was really big in the college divestment network, and together we set up over 30 hubs each at different high schools in the city or around the city. And this meant constantly emailing people, texting people, giving them resources, plugging them into the movement, sharing this messaging because we wanted to make sure end fossil fuels didn't get lost. And it was a long process. It took up all of my summer, so many Zoom calls, but it felt so fulfilling. And I got really, really close to my organizing partners at Fridays for Future, who are also in high school and who are also spending their summers doing this. We flyered almost every day for parts of the summer, and we went to so many art builds together. I like to say that making art is like eating food. It's something that when you do it with another person, it just bonds you. And but what we were able to do is we were able to make these activities youth-centered. Something really special that we got to do, carried over from 2019, was meet at Ethical Culture. Ethical Culture is where young people planned the 2019 marches. So we invited all of our hub captains there the weeks leading up to the march to just meet, practice chants, give ideas, because our entire thesis of our organizing style was that if someone feels like they contributed, that they were an organizer in just a little way, they're going to bring more people to this march because this march is a part of them. And I think that went a long way beyond just young people, beyond just a few high schools. It went through faith communities. It went through unions. The amount of unions that were at that march blew me away. And such an amazing summer and year of labor organizing. There were so many unions. It was so cool. And that was what we were trying to do on a smaller scale with young people, but that's what everybody did. If you looked at the people there were hubs were separated by every couple blocks. There was so many different hubs, so many different types of people within hubs. It was beautiful, and everyone was just marching with their own communities. And I think something I can personally share that has to do with intersectional and intergenerational organizing is that my mom and little sister were part of their own hub, completely different than what I was doing. So while I was joining all of these Zoom calls and just talking to a lot of high schoolers and trying to plan this march, they were working with Climate Families New York City to get over 400 signups of just young children and their families to join their hub. We marched about 10 blocks away from each other, but we were together in solidarity from different identity groups across the family, all marching together. We actually were able to write an op-ed about this experience in Teen Vogue leading up to the march to further amplify this message of end fossil fuels. And my mom talked about how she wants to see more mothers, fathers, parents doing this work and supporting youth activists. And this is something that brought us a lot closer. And I think it can do that in every single way. Elders Climate Action is such a perfect example of this because it's based on the idea of supporting younger generations through another generation. Like that humanity and solidarity is very beautiful. And I think the exact principles on what climate organizing should be based on. But yeah, then March Day arrived after months and months of Zoom calls. Those final first few days, we were at this big organizing space in Bushwick that just had art everywhere. If you see some of the photos, like stickers and banners that looked like this, we were just painting those and using, old bike tires to tie up signs and all this awesome sustainable materials with artists who've been doing this work for so long. And all these organizers who'd come from all over the country, come from all over all different backgrounds, were able to just meet and, like I said, share a meal, make art together. It's the same thing. And just keep planning. I can also show this is something that all young people were wearing, and we made a bunch of signs that looked like this too. We wanted to highlight that as young people, we are the voting bloc that put Biden in office in 2020, and we want to be able to do it again with the assurance that there will be no more fossil fuel projects approved. We want to have our voices heard if we're going to mobilize our votes again. And that was our biggest message. That was the message of my speech. And that's what we were trying to show through all of the youth art. So yeah, anyway, that space in Bushwick was so amazing because I just got to meet everyone, be part of an activist community that wasn't online, and then watch that all turn into the day of the march when we showed up at 8 a.m. with bagels. And I'm sure some of you were marshals and helping out and volunteering as longtime veterans of the climate movement. And we all just brought that art over. We made it happen the day of, and it was such a whirlwind. But and the NYPD made the route very narrow, and it was a long, long march because of that. But even though it was a little messy, it was really worth it. And I mean, I remember my mom called me when I was at the very front of the march and we'd reached the stage, and she said, "Have you guys started walking yet? We haven't." And that was the moment I knew that it had really surpassed all expectations, and that 75,000 people was the projected number. It was so exciting. And when I gave that speech, there weren't 75,000 people in the crowd, but there were a lot of people. And I was so nervous, but I saw my friends and everyone right in the front. They pushed their way to get there. And I just felt like I was speaking for a cause and for people that wanted me to say this. And I was so supported by everyone there. It's hard because I don't have any photos of them, but like all these other organizers are just such beautiful people. And they really helped me through that entire experience. And the people who organized 2019, Shia Bastida, Aisha Siddiqa, they were like my mentors, and we spent so much time together giving me advice, telling, like, they're professionals in the climate movement now. They did what I did once too, and it's just like we call them generations even though we're literally 4 years apart. But they gave me so much advice and so much support, and it was just really a great thing to be part of. And then the next day we were on the cover of the New York Times, and that was just amazing because if you had gone back 6 months ago, like, criticizing Biden was seen as like, was not what we were going to talk about as the Democratic Party. We were like, that was just not in the mainstream media at all. And he was the climate president and the IRA was enough, but we didn't settle for that. I mean, people power pushed for more, and we are going to push for more until we get it. And I think that, it's sometimes it's crazy when you see your work manifest into like actual real change, but when media shifts to look at a whole new perspective, when language shifts to recognize fossil fuels, those are wins. Those are wins that reduce emissions, that save lives. And that's what I think will hopefully happen from this march, and I'm pretty confident that it will. And yeah, that's all I have to say. But if anyone wants to also share their experiences here at the march and just talk about that before Bill McKibben comes on, I'd love to.
Thank you, Helen. We've got lots of questions and lots of people talking about how inspiring all of that was. What do you think you learned about working with activists who weren't your age?
It honestly, I learned new ways to communicate, I think. And even just like online, we are so much more like, we can be more informal, just FaceTiming each other all the time. But I was like entering these new spaces with people this was their job. And at first it was intimidating, I think, to meet like climate organizers and like community organizers who did this like professionally. And I felt like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be here. And those first few like calls were always during school. So I was always like joining late or like in a class. But I quickly got over that when people when I realized how much people were centering the youth perspective and cared that I was there. And I guess I just learned that there are so many people, I think sometimes we have a lot of doom about the climate. And I think what has really helped me get over that is the amount of competent and amazing and awesome people working to stop this in every little angle. And this is these are just organizers and, you know, people who work in comms and politics, but there's also the scientists and the innovators who weren't even in those conversations yet. And I got to just meet so many diverse perspectives, all surrounded by trying to end fossil fuels, trying to fight climate change, faith leaders who were dedicated to that. I mean, I didn't even know those existed. And I think that that's something that intergenerational movements show you, rather than just a bunch of high schoolers. Yes, it's powerful to be young, but it's also that lived experience, these different specializations of what you can do, what you bring to the table. That is so powerful, to have that all together. And I definitely I learned a lot through them. And what about what I want to do with my life? I have so many ideas now. And I know youth climate activists are I don't have a future, but I like to think that, I mean, maybe I'll get to have a sliver of the careers and lives that some of these people who've been working on this for so long have, and that would be amazing.
Yeah. What do you think your biggest takeaway was from the experience?
I think I'm still processing, but I'll try to think of one. I think I tried to say it, but and it's very cliche, but hard work, it can really show through. I mean, I go to my high school is there's a lot of hard work, and it feels never ending sometimes when you're a teenager, and it's hard to feel the fruits of your labor, I guess. But when you do work, I think that is in that is centered in community and love, I think you can see that work manifest. And I mean, it's obviously really lucky if you can, but it's not just being on the New York Times or whatever. It's also just the amount of people who talked to you and felt heard and seen and had a good time. And I don't know what I felt in 2019, the organizers gave that to me. And so my takeaway was I was able to a little bit give that to other people. And that is I'm so lucky for that. And I never want to stop doing that.
Oh, great. What do you say to people who say voting doesn't change anything and who don't want to vote?
I have actually run into a lot of pushback on this messaging, on voting, on targeting Biden. And I just want everyone to know how much thought went into it, to this specific line of climate organizing. So voting has such an impact. There's all the statistical studies that saying one person doesn't matter, but those statistical studies discourage large numbers of people from voting. And that's just not what we want, because large numbers have a huge impact. Think about every close election we've had that has changed the course of history. Al Gore, I know we'll still think about that. But I think that, and with Biden too, it's he needs to prioritize voting blocks. He thinks about electoral politics all the time, trying to get reelected. That's what the Democratic Party is thinking about. And if they know what our biggest priorities are and what the most important voting blocks young people are, what are their priorities, that is going to shift the kind of commitments they make. And being unrelenting on what you want. I mean, these politicians will give you a lot of false solutions. They'll give you a lot of great solutions that just aren't what you need. He's done a lot of things that aren't addressing fossil fuel dependency specifically. And the fact that you won't let up on that changes things. That changes what they know your political priorities are. And people say Biden, he's under so much stress, the Republicans, but it doesn't change the fact that he signs off on these permits. Those go across his desk. And he also needs to listen to us. He's one person. I mean, activist movements can be so powerful when you pick one clear demand, end fossil fuels, and you have one person who can do it. And that's Biden. And that's to have that is so lucky, to have like so many emissions that can just not happen, and so much that America can do on the global stage to make up for their history of polluting with just one person and one action. I mean, that is what we need to be pushing for, and voting is that's our leverage as people in a democracy. That's our leverage. And I think that people get discouraged, and people think that we just need to settle and just duck our heads in this like moment of chaos. But no, I mean, that's not democracy. You're supposed to criticize your elected officials. You're supposed to get what you want, fight for what you want, and organize. That's what this was all based on. So that's what we got to do. And voting is a part of that.
Got a couple of minutes before Bill gets started. I was wondering what you thought about the Biden administration. The Biden administration's executive order on the American Climate Corps.
I think, well, this is actually a great example of like what organizing can do. It can bring us these wins. But I also think that we need to, again, like look critically about what we're missing in some of what Biden is giving us and giving the environmental movement. I mean, the Climate Corps is it's a structure that's set up, but is it an insured workforce? No, you still have to get people to sign up, and it still has so far to go. And it also doesn't address the demands of this march, despite it happening right after this march, which was to end fossil fuels, to end new approvals of fossil fuel projects. A new workforce of just green energy is amazing, but it can't just offset on it by itself the emissions that carbon bombs are going to be having years in the future. Like every time there's a new project, we see these emissions manifest like years and years down the line. That's fossil fuel dependency we're ensuring years and years down the line, because think about how much time it takes to drill and to get all that oil and to refine it. Like that's all still happening. So I think that while we have this, and while we know organizing works, because like Sunrise had been fighting for that for so long, and like that's awesome, I think we need to reaffirm our demands and just say, that's not what we asked for. In this march, 75,000 people also just asked to end fossil fuels, to end all new approvals, because we can have a green workforce if we have no more fossil fuels that we're dependent on anymore. And I think that making that distinction is really clear. Being clear and empowered in our rhetoric is really clear. And that's what I think this march was a lot about, was giving that messaging to groups all over the country of all different intersections that we know what we want, and that's to end fossil fuels, and staying true on that. I hope all of us on this call can do in our own organizing, because we do know the real perpetrator is these projects. But anyway, welcome, Bill.
Well, thank you so much, Helen. Thank you for your amazing work with the march and with other things we didn't have time to talk about. And we hope that we'll have the opportunity to work with you many times in the future. But want to also welcome our other speaker, Bill McKibben. Bill is the founder of Third Act, which organizes people over the age of 60 for action on climate and justice. He's been in this for the long haul. His 1989 book, The End of Nature, is regarded as the first book for a general audience about climate change, and it's appeared in 24 languages. He's gone on to write 20 books, and his work regularly appears in periodicals from the New Yorker to the Rolling Stone. He serves as a Schumann Distinguished Scholar in Environmental Studies at Middlebury College, and as a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He's won the Gandhi Peace Prize, as well as honorary degrees from 20 colleges and universities. He was awarded the Right Livelihood Award, sometimes called the Alternative Nobel, in the Swedish Parliament. Foreign Policy named him to its inaugural list of the world's 100 most important global thinkers. He helped found 350.org, the first global grassroots climate movement, which has organized protests for climate action on every continent, including Antarctica. He played an important role in launching the opposition to big oil pipeline projects like Keystone XL and the fossil fuel divestment campaign, which has become the biggest anti-corporate campaign in history, with endowments more than $40 trillion stepping back from oil, gas, and coal. Stepped down as board chair of 350 in 2015, left the board and stepped down from his volunteer role as senior advisor in 2020, so accepting emeritus status. He lives in the mountains above Lake Champlain with his wife, the writer Sue Halpern, where he spends much time as he can in the outdoors. In 2014, biologists credited his career by naming a new species of woodland gnat. So I can get this right, Megophthalmidae McKibben, in his honor. So, Bill, we're delighted to have you here and looking forward to what you can tell us.
So delighted to be here, and let me give you first the weather report from the state of Vermont. I was out hiking for a while with the dog this afternoon, and the trees have begun to pop. It's starting to look orange and yellow and red, which is always the happy moment of the year here. And what a pleasure to be with you all, and what a pleasure to be with Helen, and to have gotten to hear a little bit of what she had to say, because I agree with it completely. It's so interesting. There's two, I was reminded of this in New York last week over and over again. There are two sides to the fight that we're engaged in here. And the one that politicians really like to work on is the demand side, the side about putting up solar panels and windmills, the part about building things like the climate core and stuff, because it's, because it's great and important and inspiring, and because it doesn't require saying no to anybody. The other half is the supply side, and that's much harder. And we've had less success there because it would require politicians and financial giants to stand up to the fossil fuel industry. And that scares the living daylights out of them, and so they avoid it if they possibly can. And it's not that we need to do one and not the other. It's that we need to do both, and they're both really important. So that American Climate Corps thing is a terrific victory, as Helen says, and one that it's been really fun to work on for a while. The great people at Sunrise were pushing it hard, and its biggest champion became my friend and Senator Bernie Sanders, who put it in the original Build Back Better bill at much larger scale than we're talking now. And I had a wonder, and this connects directly to this generational work, because I was able to connect Bernie up with my old friend Bill Moyers. And Bill Moyers was really the second in command, but effectively leading the Peace Corps when it was founded in 1962. And he was telling Bernie all the stories about how they went around the country recruiting people for the Peace Corps and things, ideas that Bernie was taking directly to put into this founding document of the new Climate Corps. This is a perfect example of figuring out how to draw from our rich progressive history to make things happen. And it's going to be wonderful to have 20,000 young people spreading out across the country doing important work. But the same week, I wrote a long piece last week for the New Yorker about what I think is going to be maybe the next big climate battle. And it centers on these plans to build out liquefied natural gas export in the Gulf of Mexico, because the numbers turn out to be crazy. That one proposed plant, CP2 in Cameron Parish, Louisiana, if it gets built, will have over its lifetime 20 times the greenhouse gas emissions of this Willow oil complex in Alaska that got everybody correctly upset earlier this year. 20 times. And it's one of 20 proposed LNG terminals that they want to build. If they build this out the way they're planning, and if the carbon burned from our exported fossil fuels counted against our national total, then we would have made no progress whatsoever in reducing emissions since 2005. In the way that the world keeps account of things, then those emissions will count against wherever they're burned, Malaysia or Vietnam or China. But the atmosphere doesn't care about that. In atmospheric terms, it's all just going up into the one sky that we share and heating the planet up. And the Biden administration could easily stop what's going to happen. These plants need, before they're built and before contracts can be signed, an export license from the Department of Energy saying that they're in the public interest, which they manifestly are not. So I think that we have a chance to stop them. Stop them maybe because alongside their effects on the climate, their effects on the people who live near them are completely ruinous. I talked about a guy in the New Yorker, in this New Yorker piece, check this out, who this may be the single human being most cursed by fossil fuels so far. He grew up in Ile de Jean Charles, Louisiana, which became the first place that the federal government evacuated officially as climate refugees because sea level rise drove everybody out of their home in 2019. He moved 30 miles upstream to Cameron, Louisiana, which he said was paradise when he arrived. And for the next 6 months, until they built the first of these big LNG export terminals a half mile away, it's flaring 80-foot plumes of flame 24/7 a lot of the time. He says it's like, living on the Las Vegas Strip. He's had to move again. They bought him out and moved him again. It's, it's like Job wandering the, it's a whole series of remarkable stories. So the bottom line is that we have to figure out how we bring pressure on our political and financial leaders to stop this kind of crazy expansion. That's what, the first meaning of that end fossil fuel thing is: build no more new stuff, period. That's what the International Energy Agency has told us to do. We have to do that. And of course, we have to do it in this strange context of our new political life, where we also have to make sure we don't elect a fascist dictator president of the United States. And that's going to be a hard balancing act over the next year. But if we don't balance it correctly, and Donald Trump takes over the White House again, then we'll lose everything that we're doing, even the stuff that's happening right so far. Believe you me, there won't be any American Climate Corps 3 days into the next Trump administration, nor will there be serious work on things like the IRA, building out clean energy. So it's going to be a very interesting moment, and boy, do we need good organizing of all kinds. And that's why ECA and Third Act and things are so important. I hope some of you will join us Thursday night for the big sort of quarterly national call at Third Act. Gina McCarthy is going to join us, and we're going to talk about how to build support for and how to help people make use of the hundreds of billions of dollars that young people in particular won in the IRA bill. We're also going to talk a lot about how to stand up to these big banks. Looks like the next big campaign, officially announcing tomorrow, is going to be to take on a kind of friendly company, Costco, and get them to stop banking with Citibank for their fossil fuel, because of their fossil fuel lending. So we've got endless amount of work to do to press Washington and to press Wall Street, and we're going to have to do it intergenerationally in all kinds of ways. That was one of the fun things about the march. It was really great to be with the ECA and Third Act and things marching along. Now they put us towards the back of the march, I think, because they consider that we're going to move slowly. Fair enough, but even in our reduced condition, we're able to make a very effective part of this fight. And there were as many people with hairlines like mine at that march as there were with hairlines like Helen's, and together it was really fun to see what was happening and what is possible. I think that we're going to be able to make some serious progress in the next while, though I don't think it's going to be easy because of the strange political complications that come in our very, very weird political life at the moment. But, you know, this summer is the great reminder of what the stakes are. You know, as you said, I wrote the first book on all of this 34 years ago, well before Helen was born. And there wasn't anything that we know now that we didn't know then. We were able to predict more or less what was going to happen and when it was going to happen, but that doesn't make it any less sad and scary when it does happen. This June, on the this June, we saw the highest temperatures that have happened on this planet in at least 125,000 years. Nobody that we would really recognize as a fellow human, certainly no human society, has ever lived through a climate like the one we're now inhabiting. The change is coming faster than it's come in tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of years. And we are the people who have both the duty and the honor of trying to figure out how to slow that down as effectively as we can. So it is really good to be with y'all. And just to say, we don't know if we're going to win. It's the physical momentum of the climate system at the moment is a scary thing to behold. But we know as sure as heck that we're going to fight, and we have at least the sense that if we do all we can, we may be able to slow the rise of temperature to the point where we won't necessarily cut civilization off at the knees. The stakes are highest for people Helen's age or Ariana's age or whatever. Because I'm going to be dead before the worst of this hits. But the stakes are high for us in a different way. Legacy is one of those abstract words until you're somewhat closer to the exit than the entrance, at which point the notion about legacy, legacy just means the world you leave behind for the people you love the most. And at the moment, we're threatening to leave behind a world that's worse than the one that we found. We're capable of reversing that if we act. The planet is outside its comfort zone, so we need to be outside our comfort zone. And that'll mean different things for different people. For me, somehow it seems to have meant ending up in jail a good many times. And I do hear on regular occasion from people our age who say, that's on my bucket list. I can help if it is, but that doesn't need to be the only way to do this. We just need everybody digging in more than we've dug in so far, because so far the temperature is still going up. So many, many thanks to everybody.
And thank you so much, Bill. We've got lots of questions. We'll see if we can get through a few. And we have one that I think is for both you and Helen, which is about the UN Climate Ambition Summit. What's that been like? What's your experience been?
You go first, Helen.
Well, I was able to attend with some of my co-march organizers and another one of my friends who was an 18-year-old organizer. I was definitely the youngest person there, which was very awkward. The UN did not know I didn't have a guardian, but I thought it was an interesting space. I mean, the UN itself has limitations when it comes to calling out these big actors like fossil fuel companies and their involvement in our governments. I mean, you can't even wear anything like to protest when you go inside the UN. Like, you couldn't wear something that said end fossil fuels. So disruption in that space is kind of hard to go about, but the UN Secretary General was really clear and strategic in how he set up this summit to be focusing on the voices of people who are actually trying to get stuff done. And this meant that the governor of California spoke, but not, our federal government, because our federal government isn't making progress, but California is. And I think that in that way, it was centering these voices, but there was also a lot of really important people who just didn't attend, and a lot of really important countries who didn't attend. But when I was there, I actually was able to have a discussion with John Kerry, who was there. To his credit, he wanted to listen to my friend and I as young people who were concerned about this. But I do think that I can still say there is a disconnect with the Biden administration and their understanding of getting rid of these projects. I think that his analysis is that they're going to slowly stop and get smaller, but it's just that each one is so big of a deal for the communities that it's in and for how many emissions it promises the next 10 and 15 years. And no matter how many times we talk about EVs and climate solutions, like what Bill said, I mean, it doesn't change the fact that we're still like fueling our own destruction with the production of this oil and gas. It will be burned. It won't just be made and left there. I mean, or it won't be just drilled and left there. I think and that was what we had this very intense discussion about it for 20 minutes. And I think that it definitely solidified my resolve that we need to keep pushing our administration to see that we all know, to show them that we all know this. We all know that these projects are the real enemy to climate action. Because like if he sees that, if President Biden sees that we know this, I think that these other solutions can't just happen alone. I think that he'll be able to act. I mean, I know the question was about the Climate Ambition Summit, but that was the majority of my experience. Still trying to keep this disruption and this movement like that 75,000 people brought to New York into spaces of like negotiation and higher level places. Like we should always be bringing protest and dissent into those spaces. I think that's something I learned too from this march. Just because you shouldn't feel just lucky to be somewhere and that you have to keep quiet. I mean, your demand is powerful. And I think that's what we need to keep doing in every space that we're in. And I know we have to be careful about this political moment. And I think we can be. I think that we're at the point where we can think critically and analyze this moment and see what's really necessary. I think pushing to end these projects is really necessary. So that's what I did there. And I thought I want to see more of that disruption in the international space, like more just demanding. And I don't know if you want to add to that.
Helen, you're way ahead of me because the UN doesn't really let me in anymore. I led a walkout of people at one of their big gathering some years ago, so I'm kind of persona non grata. I have been going to the COPs each year, but I'm not going to go this year in Dubai. It's a step too far to have the head of the UAE oil company actually leading the negotiations. There's a sort of, I mean, I don't know. It just is, the whole thing is slightly crazy. But Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, has been more forthright than any world leader yet on where we are in the climate crisis. Forthright about the state of the world. He said yesterday, we are opening the gates to hell, and that's absolutely right. And forthright about the problem. He said earlier this summer to the oil companies, your core product is our core problem. And he's absolutely right, and I'm very glad to see that happening. And I think they were very glad, from all the things I heard from the inside, to see people out marching again and starting to put some pressure on this system. We obviously need a lot more people. When I helped organize the big march in New York in 2014, and we had 400,000 people in the street then. And we need to be building back up to that kind of scale, because that's, the power of the fossil fuel industry is money. And the power of the movement against them is people, bodies, numbers, passion, spirit. And we need to bring that. We need to rebuild back post-pandemic into that kind of movement. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important to get older people involved. But yeah, Helen, stick it out in there as long as you can, and then when you're tired of it, lead a protest right inside, and then they'll exile you for a while, and you won't have to go back, into the halls of power right away. So
Yeah, I kept putting these stickers back on and the security guards would just pull them off every time they saw me.
I'll tell
Um,
you that. You want to hear a funny story? At the uh, Copenhagen Climate Conference in 2009, which was the first of it failed, but it was an important climate conference and effort to do it. We just started 350.org, and we faced exactly the same problem. They wouldn't let people have T-shirts or signs or anything else. So how did we solve it? We printed up um, thousands and thousands of neckties and scarves that said 350 on them, and passed them out to all the delegates as they were going in. And these guys are as interested in swag as anybody else. And they all have to wear neckties wherever they are, scarves if they're women. So everybody had them on all over the conference hall. It was really fun. So you're exactly right. You got to keep persistence and creativity are the hallmarks here.
That's great. On another note, Bill, what do you think about opposing plastic production as a front in the campaign to end fossil fuels?
It's important. I'm doing a big program this weekend with Judy Yank of Beyond Plastics, and I get to be on her board. There were a lot of, she and a lot of others were actually at the march in New York Sunday before last, and it was really good to see them because plastic, here's the thing. The fossil fuel industry, having fracked the heck out of Texas and Louisiana and Appalachia, has way more gas than we need. That's why they're busily trying to export it around the world. And their other plan for what to do with it is to try and turn it into single-use plastic. So it's basically a fight against the whole petrochemical enterprise. And it's the same players. Exxon, I think, now is the biggest producer of plastic on planet Earth. So it's part and parcel of the same fight, and I recommend Beyond Plastics as a group to engage with. Judy Yank is very, very smart.
I also had a question about what do you think about the importance of environmental advocates adopting a plant-based diet?
I think it's a useful thing to do, but as always, I try to caution people that the goal here is not the purification of our own lives, it's actual action. We're past the point where we're going to solve this problem one Tesla at a time, one vegan dinner at a time. Important to do those things in your own life, and they don't hurt, but the most important thing an individual can do is be a little less of an individual. Come together with others in movements large enough to change the basic economic and political ground rules. As for trying to convince people to change their diets, I've found it's most useful to try. This is one of these places where trying to get people to at least make a move in the right direction is really helpful. I recommend a book that I wrote a foreword to. I'm going to forget the guy's name now, but the name of the book is Meet Me Halfway, MEAT. And the guy who wrote it, who's a wonderful guy, founded what he called the reducitarian movement, the theory of which is even if it's too hard for you to go vegan or vegetarian because you've spent your whole life eating in one fashion and those are the recipes you know how to cook, it's entirely possible to figure out how to cut in half the amount of meat that you eat. And if you could get 10% of people to do that, that's probably as useful as getting, at the moment, 1% of Americans are vegans. So, work on all fronts would be my advice, but work together and don't worry too much about your own polishing your own halo. The job is to, turn as many of us into to build a system that allows more of us to live slightly more angelic lives.
Yep. Thank you so much, Bill. It's been great having you tonight. We hope it won't be long before we have you back again. And
Absolutely.
Find out with you.
Absolutely. What a pleasure to see you all. And I hope we'll see you with Gina McCarthy on Thursday night. I think it'll be fun. And Ariana, Helen, everybody else, great fun to see you guys. On we go. Be in touch so we can figure out where to kick them next. So good stuff.
Thank you. And we will send out
I'm
information.
sorry to leave. I have to go off and do another Zoom. Right now, we're launching the Maryland chapter of Third Act, so we're having a good time. But bless you all and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely an important thing to do. We appreciate Bill and Helen both being with us this evening, and got a few actions that we want to make you all aware of. Tonight's action related to the march and the call, and tonight's call is to ask President Biden to declare a climate emergency. And you're going to be getting emails with links for all of these things, plus there are links in the chat. Also, we'd like you to thank President Biden and the White House for what is going well for establishing the American Climate Corps. And you can learn more about the American Climate Corps at the White House website. And the link for that is in the chat. And coming up in October, we'll have our last national call for the year. So we tend to have the national call at the end of the month, be very close to Thanksgiving and Christmas. There'll be other things coming up. But on October 24th at 7 p.m., we have Nathaniel Stinnett of the Environmental Voter Project on mobilizing voters, a very important topic this year and especially next year. So thank you all so much for coming and for being part of all this, and we will see you soon.